Many people in Boston might remember Keri Singleton as a kid from Roxbury who could write, dance, and manage upcoming talent. After moving to New York City, he's working in the same field, hosting a syndicated radio show online, and still telling stories, whether in books, on stage, and in his autobiographical film, Live to Tell My Story. And to tell us about the makings of the film is the host of Keri's Corner, Keri D. Singleton. Thank you very much, and welcome back to Boston, Keri.
Welcome back, man. Thank you for the welcome back. Appreciate it.
So why do a film at this point?
Basically, Live to Tell My Story is an autobiographical piece that I had wanted to put together for a very long time, Chris, a very long time. And the main reason for doing the film was for it to serve as an inspiration for other people that have dreams and goals that seem unattainable, whether they be, in the arts, whatever those dreams are, and whatever obstacles a person may feel that they have, they're able to, hop over those hurdles and achieve their dreams. And I wanted to pretty much use my story to inspire other people.
Well, one of the things we learned from this film is that people really recognize their dreams at a very early stage. It was a point in this film, you're a kid growing up in the city, and you find out that you like to write.
Yeah.
What was that like?
I was 9 years old, man, when I entered a writing contest in the Boston Globe, and it was around Halloween time, and they were asking Boston residents to submit poems, other literary pieces. So I wrote a little poem called Boo and Simon Sue, about something about a ghost chasing a kid through Dorchester and Roxbury, or something to that effect. And when I saw my little poem in the Boston Globe as a 9-year-old, with my little name, printed, Boston, Keri Singleton, that was kind of like it for me. I realized, what, writing is cool. I like to write, and I like to be recognized for my writing. So at a very young age, I wanted to be a writer. I think, my mother, who's also a great writer, encouraged me all of my life to pursue, literary arts. So.
And how does that lead to music?
Music was my thing. I wouldn't say that was my mother's thing. That was my thing. I don't know. I mean, just like most kids, I loved music. I, was born in the 70s, but grew up in the 80s and the early 90s and loved music. I loved R&B. I loved the sound, and I loved to dance. I was definitely an avid dancer. And I just kind of found a passion in music that seemed to supersede the passion that I had for writing. I can't explain why.
But and you're growing up at the time of New Edition, these are kids out of Orchard Park. I mean, how do people like you in the neighborhood respond to that?
Oh man, New Edition was everything for us, man. Like, they grew up in Orchard Park. I grew up in Charlene Park Homes, which is probably a mile away, if that. And, they were it. They were the larger than life. They were individuals that looked like us, but they were also from the same zip code as us. I think everybody, in that era loved New Edition. And we certainly, my friends and I, had created a group called the Sly Five, and we danced to New Edition songs. We performed New Edition songs. We wanted to be New Edition. Who didn't?
Well, later on, we get into music, the hip hop hitting its stride. And at the same time, you have life crossing over the music, and sometimes not always smoothly. What was that like for you and the people you were managing?
I managed a lot of local artists here in Boston, primarily hip-hop artists. There were a couple of singers, some other dance groups. As a matter of fact, the first group that I managed was a group that only danced from Roxbury. Rap and hip-hop, of course, in the early to mid-'90s, came into Boston just as strong as it did pretty much in other urban areas across the country. And so I found myself managing a lot of rap groups and rap solo artists. But rap seemed to, more so than any other genre of music, really be a mirror to the struggles of urban life. And so all too often, a lot of the artists that I worked with here in Boston, they were very talented lyrically, but they were also going through the struggles of the street life, in and out of jail, broken homes and, things of that nature. And I had to deal with those realities in the lives of those artists while I was working with them.
This has been a news, and we're talking with Keri D. Singleton. Keri, the Troubles it was one of the reasons you left Boston and moved on to New York. But New York, it was not easy to get a foothold there. Why did you stick with it?
I felt like, well, to be clear, I moved out of my mother's house directly to New York. I didn't have a real adulthood in Boston insofar as having my own apartment and paying my own bills. I didn't have that experience. I literally went from being my mother's baby to Brooklyn. And it was a culture shock for me, not so much the city itself, because I'd always visited New York as a young person. I have cousins that live on Long Island. So I was definitely no stranger to New York City at all. But what I was a stranger to was paying rent and washing my own clothes and buying my own food. And I think those elements were, I'm not sure that I was really ready for that because I had not done that previous to moving to Brooklyn. But there was always the fear of failure. I moved out of Boston with a determination to never return. I moved out of Boston with a determination to succeed in the music business to some degree. To be honest, I wanted to be a promotions director at a record label. For me, that was my dream job. And I was determined by any means necessary to not have to come back to Boston as a perceived failure.
I know in this film you say kind things about both of your parents, but there were two occasions when you're trying to pay homage to your father. He was murdered more than 20 years ago,
right?
And you're bringing that up again in the film. Why do that?
It was part of my journey. It was part of my journey, and doing the film in and of itself, Chris, wasn't as easy as I thought it would be. Because I had to decide what was going to be told and what was not going to be told. And ultimately, there was a lot of things that I probably would not have wanted to tell in the story. But I talked to my producer, a gentleman named Chris Williams from Brooklyn, and he said, if you're going to tell a story, tell the story. If you're going to inspire people, give them a reason to be inspired. Let them know what your struggle really was. My father's death was definitely a part of my struggle. In fact, it was one of the reasons that I moved to New York City in 1996. Certainly it wasn't the only reason, but it was one of the reasons that pushed me out. And I kind of felt like I needed people to understand what I experienced growing up in Boston, why I was so determined to leave, and what made me feel like I needed to be in another place in order to find myself, much less my career.
Well, people can still follow you because we have the internet and we have Keri D. Singleton. Yep. So what's the best way to find your way to that?
I hate to say Google me because I think that's so uncool, but you can Google my name, Keri D. Singleton. I have a website, www.keridsingleton.com. And of course on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, I'm all over the place.
And they can see the film too.
The film's on YouTube, Live to Tell My Story. Bring a tissue and some popcorn when you watch it is what I would suggest.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Keri Singleton.